It's been 1 year since President Biden's landmark bipartisan bill, an over $1 trillion 5-year commitment to improve America's failing roads, bridges, transportation. We're talking about addressing clean water and creating high-paying jobs and also looking at America's digital divide. Joining me is Mitch Landrieu, who was appointed as the president's senior advisor responsible for coordinating this implementation. Thank you for joining me on the record.
Ebony, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely. Let's talk about it's been 1 year and a lot has happened in a year. First, let's hit the highlights of what has happened since this infrastructure bill has been rolled out.
Man, it's crazy. 1 year ago, the president signed the bill, and we got after it in a big way. So it's a $1.2 trillion bill, investments in fixing our roads and our bridges, our airports, our ports, our waterways, clean air, clean water, high-speed internet to close the digital divide, and of course, getting us ready for this new clean energy economy that's running our way in a really, quick way. And so, we got to work right away. My job is to organize really the whole country. All the cabinet secretaries have been meeting, talking, figuring out how to work together, breaking down the stovepipes. I've been in touch with every governor in the country, asked them to appoint infrastructure coordinators. I've talked to mayors, county executives, so that the government can kind of create a partnership with themselves so they're working well together, work with the private sector, the not-for-profits, and getting this money to the ground. Now, just in the last year, $185 billion we pushed out of the door. We got 7,000 projects on their way in 4,000 communities in all 50 states and the territories. The president and the vice president have been traveling around the country. Over 200 trips have been made. And so we're just kind of making it happen because, as the president said, we've got to take back from the world, the number one position on infrastructure that we used to hold a long time ago. We're at 13 right now, so we got to get that back. But as importantly, we have to invest in ourselves. And investing in ourselves means building infrastructure so that all of us can have an easier life, a better life, a more efficient life, also one that reduces our costs, gets us back and forth to work, to school, to play, to church, so that we can win the 21st century economy. That's what it's all about.
Really quickly on reducing the cost, because kind of what's I know been a thorn in the side of this bill is inflation. So some projects haven't been able to move forward, some maybe even canceled. Some contractors may have had to kind of go back and look at the estimates. So how has inflation kind of played in this, and how are you working around that?
Well, inflation is the number one priority in the country right now. The economy is really, really strong. The president has positioned us to weather the storm of inflation better than any economy in the world, but he knows that reducing the cost is really important, which is why he asked Congress to actually reduce the cost of prescription drugs, to actually limit the amount of money people have to pay out of pocket for prescriptions, to make sure your healthcare premiums go down, to fighting to get gas prices down, all of those things he's pushing on. And in terms of inflation, this is a 3, 5, 7-year bill. At some point in time, inflation will start to go down. Things will get a little bit easier, but I'm not aware of anybody, canceling any projects because of that. This is a long-term bill. It's actually going to reduce inflation over time. And of course, it's going to build our lives back better. But let me just say this. When the president talked about building back better, better meant something to him. Better means equity. Better means making sure that we spend this money in communities of color, in rural communities, in tribal communities that have been left out over time, in a number of different ways. And I'd like to just talk to you about them just for a second, if you'll allow me to. The digital divide is critically important. Everybody knows that if you don't have access to information, you are out of luck. And the president wants to level the playing field. And so he's got $65 billion in this bill to make sure that everybody has internet in America, internet for all. And for those people that actually have fiber, buy their house, but they can't afford it, there's also the Affordable Connectivity Program that anybody can sign up for at getinternet.gov. That basically means you can get it if you live at 200% of the poverty level or below. You can actually get free internet in this country and make sure you're connected, because you've heard the president say this. A little girl does not need to be sitting in the back of her mama's car in a parking lot of McDonald's trying to do her homework because she doesn't have internet at home. That is just a symbol of a country that needs to do better, especially in communities of color. The other thing that's in this bill, and everybody knows that communities of color disproportionately live close to legacy pollution. So abandoned mine lands, orphan wells, Superfund sites, brownfield sites. 26% of blacks and 29% of Hispanics live within 3 miles of a Superfund site. There's $21 billion in this bill that's moving around the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, and through Michael Reagan, the great administrator at EPA, to make sure that we have clean air, clean water, and that we just clean up all that dirty stuff people left behind because their mama didn't teach them right. You know, lead pipes is another big problem. You know, we've talked about Flint, but Flint's just the tip of the iceberg. There are lots of lead pipes that are running dirty water into kids' houses all across America. And so we've got money into that. Finally, on the roads and the bridges side, I'm from the South, so you understand this, that somebody always lives on the other side of, and then ... you fill it in. The railroad track, the lake, the river, the bridge. And we put bridges in the middle, right down the middle of historic African-American communities. So there's $4 billion in this bill and in another bill to actually help reconnect communities and redesign those communities so that we can fold them back together.
Stay on that point for a quick moment, because I do want to ask you specifically about that. Because are there ways to prevent what some are calling urban renewal racism? Like we saw in Texas, there was $7 billion put into a plan to remake the highways, but the transportation department ended up having to step in and invoke the Civil Rights Act to stop it. So
sure,
we saw that stop, but is there anything in place that's going to be happening in so many other places? Are we going to see that happen more? How are you able to?
The answer to that is you got to play offense and defense. Now, Congress, works the way Congress works, and half the money goes straight to the governors, and then the other half comes, the mayors and the governors can apply for. For the ones that they can apply for, we've got a little bit more control over what they do and where they go. For the ones that they don't apply for, they come in what they call revolving funds. We have the ability to step in and stop them from doing something that violates the Civil Rights Act. Now, we hope that we don't get there with governors. And by the way, every state is different. The way you would lay down something in South Dakota is different from what you would do in New York City or, for example, in New Orleans. But the whole point of this is to really pay attention to the impact that it has, the negative impact that it historically has had on African-American community or the Hispanic community or tribal communities, and to make sure that we actually move them in the right direction. Listen, I was in Denver, Colorado. There's a highway, I-70. It's a big old thing. And there was a highway there right through a historic Hispanic community. They actually now have dug basically a tunnel underneath it, and they have reconnected the community. It's incredible. And we have like 100 different proposals from around the country to actually reconnect communities, and we're going to make some great headway on that. Let me make just one other point, too, because what we want to do is increase the amount of public contracts that minority companies have. And so the president has set a goal. The president has set a goal of 15% of federal procurement going to disadvantaged businesses, which means $100 billion in contracts. Now, 90% of this is going to get spent by governors and mayors. And so on the local level, you have to advocate for them also, making sure that minority contractors have the technical assistance, the know-how, the capacity, the ability to actually bid on contracts that are rightly scaled so that we can grow generational wealth. That's really important to the president. And then I'd finally make one other point. I know I'm giving you a lot of information quick.
It's like a preacher. It's okay. Make it quick. I got you.
Don't stop me. I got the Holy Spirit. On transit, just getting people back and forth to work on time and to buses that matter with low and no emission buses. Now, there's billions of dollars to make sure that all the kids that are riding on yellow school buses are riding on new battery operated buses. Now, I took the bus to school. I used to catch the bus on the corner of Johnson Street and Napoleon. And I can just tell you, when I got off that bus and that bus, went away and I got left there with that exhaust wafted in my head, that's why I told my mom I didn't do good in school. But maybe it's because I didn't study as much as I should have.
That's all right. Look where you are now.
But the amount, when kids are suffering from asthma and the kind of health effects we have. And so we want to make sure that these buses are clean, as are the environments in the schools. There's money in this bill to do that, and that is really directly related to particularly kids of color, Hispanic kids, and tribal communities as well.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you so much for coming on the record. We definitely will be watching and keeping up to date on also how the states are allocating this money. The federal government has released a lot of money. We want to make sure the states use it and look at communities that have been for decades disenfranchised.
Yeah, boy, Ebony, let me just say this before everybody gets off. The president's did his job by getting the money, and we're doing our job by getting it to the ground. The community's got to continue to do their job too. by advocating to the mayors, to the state representatives, the congressmen, and particularly governors about making sure that this money gets spent the right way on whether it's high-speed internet, whether it's EV charging stations, whether it's the grid, that the plans that they present to the federal government actually are representative of what the community's interests are. So if you push from the bottom up, we're going to push from the top down. We're going to meet in a good place for communities that have been left behind, because that's what the president wants to do. He's made that commitment, and he's going to deliver on that promise for the American people.
Good stuff, Mitch. I want to have you back as we kind of follow up and look at some of these communities and have them on to just kind of refresh some of the work that's being done. Thank you so much,
Yes,
Mitch
ma'am.
Landrieu, the president's senior advisor responsible for coordinating and implementing these plans. We appreciate you for coming on the record.
Thanks, Ebony. Have a great day.
You too.